Present.
Representative Josh Calloway.
Here.
Representative Camo.
Here.
Representative Kleins.
Here.
Representative Decker.
Present.
Representative Doan.
Present.
Representative Fleming. Representative Grossberg. Representative Grossel.
Here.
Representative Hale.
Here.
Representative Jackson. Representative Massaroni.
Here.
Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative Payne.
Here.
Representative Proctor.
Present.
Representative Rayburn. Representative Riley. Representative Rorks.
Here.
Representative Stalker.
Present.
Representative Thompson. Representative Truitt.
Here.
Representative Wilner.
Here.
Co-Chair West.
Here.
Co-Chair Lewis. And then Chair Tipton.
Present. And I'd like to remind the members I still have one good eye to keep an eye on all of y'all today. Okay. At this time, Co-Chair West, do you have any comments you want to share with us to open up?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, any other members have any other introductions or comments at this time? Representative Kleins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to represent a couple gentlemen I used to serve with on the Kentucky High School Athletic Association Board of Control, our Commissioner Julian Tackett and our Associate Commissioner Butch Cope. Welcome.
Any other members have any introductions or comments? At this time, we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. They were shared with you electronically. We have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motions or
Second.
second?
Second.
Have a second. Any questions or discussions on the minutes? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. We do have a full agenda today. To begin with, we have Austin Reed with us online. Austin, if you could click on here, I know you probably got some material to share with us. Austin is a federal education policy analyst with the National Conference of State Legislators, and I've asked him to come with us today and share about what's going on in Washington, D.C. in regard to education. I know Congress passed House Resolution 1 earlier in the year, and there were some education changes. So, Austin, would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tipton and Chair West and Chair Lewis for this invitation. My name is Austin Reed. I'm a Federal Affairs Advisor for the National Conference of State Legislatures.
Austin, as practice, I do swear witnesses in. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, well, please proceed with your presentation. Austin, it's good to have you with us here. Even if you're not in person in Kentucky, it's good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Chair Tipton. I would have loved to have been in Frankfurt this afternoon or this morning. I see a lot of members that I've gotten to know in my service here and a number of presenters that I've also gotten to know. Fortunately, it didn't work with my travel schedule, and that's probably for the best. I am feeling under the weather today, and so I hope that you'll permit any lack of vibrancy in this presentation as I deal with this cold. But there's certainly plenty to tell you all about what's going on in Washington, D.C. I'm going to limit my presentation to the provisions that we're tracking in the HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. But I know there are a number of other newsworthy items that are taking place in our nation's capital, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions from members in the Q&A portion as you all request. I will share my presentation here just for a second, and we will begin. So, of course, as you all know, there was substantial legislation passed this Congress in July known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Some call it OB3. That's another shorthand you'll hear for this, but it's a House Resolution 1. And it was a pretty significant bill. In fact, over the next 10 years, I want to start with just the fiscal impact of this bill and then take a look at the provisions, the notable provisions that will really impact education both in the elementary and secondary level as well as the post-secondary level. So overall, this bill will increase the federal deficit by $3.4 trillion over the next 10 years. Most of that deficit increase comes through the extension and or passage of new tax cuts and that will reduce or will result in a decrease of revenues by about 4.5 trillion over this time. Those revenues, those reduced revenues coming into the federal government will be offset partially by a reduction in federal spending of about $1.1 trillion over this 10-year window. The reason I bring this up is because the three main areas for cost savings that were achieved through this bill all do have some relation to programs that we see in education. So the main cost savings are going to come through the Medicaid program. That'll be about $900 billion in savings or so. The second largest cost savings were achieved through changes and reforms to the student loan program, totaling a little under $300 billion. And then finally, the third largest cost savings was achieved through the SNAP program, a little under $200 billion. And as I'll detail, each of these major cost savings will have an impact on education institutions in states. I'll start with SNAP and Medicaid, and I will acknowledge that these are both very complicated topics and are outside of my typical area of expertise, but I've coordinated with our experts here internally at NCSL just to give a quick overview of how both these SNAP and Medicaid changes, likely the most significant changes that we see overall in this bill, may have an impact on education. So first, of course, there are some fiscal impacts to be expected from changes to the SNAP program. I'm sure you were covering this in other contexts, but of course, it is noteworthy that for the first time, this bill enacts a new cost share with states for federal benefits provided through the SNAP program. And that is based on a state's payment error rate. So if a state has a payment error rate below 6%, there will be no cost share. But of course, above that 6%, there are varying levels of state cost share, which will be a new cost to states. In addition, there will be the increase in the state share of administrative costs for this program. It used to be a 50-50 split. Now it'll be a 75-25 split, with 75% of the administrative costs of this program being paid for by states. Certainly will add some fiscal pressure to your budgets. In terms of its impact on schools, there's a couple of areas to watch. Of course, with the SNAP program, there is the introduction of a number of different policies, particularly related to work requirements that may reduce overall population eligibility for the SNAP program. And this could impact education in a couple of ways. First, many schools use participation in the SNAP program as a proxy to certify participation in the free or reduced price lunch school meal program. If a student is no longer eligible for SNAP benefits, the school will then need to directly certify the student through usually a paper-based application, and that can oftentimes be complicated and can result in sometimes students who may be eligible not being counted for those meal programs. Additionally, many states, and I'm not certain of Kentucky, but many states use various proxies for a student's low income status to provide weighted student funding in the state's funding formula. And to the extent that states are reliant on SNAP participation rates as that proxy, the decrease in SNAP participation could have a downstream impact on the flow of funds to schools if a state is using that SNAP proxy rather than some other proxy for low income status. Again, that's not required by federal law, but states do use that, and that reduction in SNAP eligibility may limit the effectiveness or the accuracy of SNAP as a proxy for a student's low income status. On the Medicaid side of things, this being where we see the most changes, of course, in terms of state fiscal impact, maybe the shortest way to say this is that state fiscal impacts are going to vary pretty widely, likely to change over time. I think it's important to note that within Medicaid, most of the cost savings are coming by reducing Medicaid benefits and by lowering enrollment in the program. That's where most of that cost savings is achieved. The bill did maintain the general cost share structure for Medicaid in states, but there may be some fiscal impacts through a number of different provisions that change the way that states can collect and use certain revenues for funding their share of costs in the program. But I won't dwell on those for too long. That does get a little bit outside of my expertise. In terms of schools and specific impact, we know that there are a number of states that have waivers to provide Medicaid services in schools, and oftentimes you see Medicaid used as a funder or payment provider for disability services in schools. Through this bill, we did not see any changes to how Medicaid interacts and applies in schools, but there is a potential that if a student's family is no longer eligible for Medicaid, that perhaps that could impact that student's ability to receive Medicaid services. But this is going to apply on a school-by-school basis as well as a state-by-state basis, depending on the state's agreement and arrangement with the Center for Medicaid Services in their application of Medicaid in their schools. So I wanted to start there simply because that's where we've gotten a lot of questions around this interaction between these two programs in schools. But here I'm going to move on to some of the more direct education provisions, starting with the scholarship tax credit that we saw passed through this bill. So as I'm sure you're aware, the HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, brings into effect a new tax credit. And it is a tax credit that goes to individuals who make qualifying donations to qualifying not-for-profit scholarship granting organizations. And it's a dollar for dollar tax credit that they receive up to $1,700. The general structure of this program is that the individual makes a donation that goes to the scholarship granting organization. The scholarship granting organization then, ostensibly through its own awarding criteria, makes awards of scholarships to families who then choose which schools they would like to apply those expenses at. In terms of eligibility on the family and student side, the eligibility is up to 300% of the area median income. That effectively means that about 90% of American students would qualify for this tax credit. It's going to vary regionally, of course, with your area's median income. But some of the initial estimates that we've seen from outside organizations, again, put that estimate that this probably covers about 90% of American students. If they do receive those scholarships, they are able to use those for eligible expenses that are broadly defined by the existing covered education savings accounts that we have in federal statute. So that can include tuition, tutoring costs, as well as other educational supports, notably in both private and public schools. Now, what's particularly interesting about this tax credit is that while it is a federal program, there is a significant role for states, and that will, I think, be probably the area of greatest questions over the next year as this program is regulated and then implemented. So the key state role here is that states have to decide to opt into this tax credit. That we'll get into which entity can do that, but generally an entity of the state needs to affirm that its citizens are eligible to receive this tax credit. Once the state opts into that, the state then determines which scholarship granting organizations in the state are eligible to receive those qualifying donations. And then on the individual side of things, if the state has an existing tax credit that's I think apples to apples similar to the federal tax credit, that credit would be reduced from the federal benefit. In terms of the regulation timeline, the Department of Treasury, not the Department of Education, is tasked with creating regulations. The timeline for that regulatory process is still unclear. This program goes into effect January 1st of 2027. I would expect that we will not see regulations for quite a few months. Of course, the regulatory process, as we'll review later on in some of the other areas of this presentation, requires, of course, first the federal government to propose a rule, then they'll have to put it up for at least a 30-day comment period, take into account those comments, and then turn those comments back around and respond to them in a final regulation. But I would not expect to see that for a number of months. NCSL is working to get in contact with the officials at the Treasury that we understand are helping to craft these regulations to relay any questions that we're getting from states. So if there's any questions that you will have during the Q&A portion, we're happy to, if you would like, relay those to Treasury. And then one small thing that's tangential but related to the scholarship tax credits that came through this bill is that we saw the expansion of 529 plans in both a elementary and secondary expense context as well as a post-secondary context to allow families to use those funds to cover expenses such as learning materials and tutoring fees. Staying with the scholarship tax credit, I think there's three major questions that is worth considering for states and particularly state legislatures. The first is there's a question of whether or not the legislature can choose to opt in. And by my reading of the statute, and I think our reading of the statute, I would say this is likely yes. If you look at the statute, the specific language is that the governor or an individual agency or entity as designated under state law can make that affirmative request for participation. I would presume that given this state law making capacity of the legislature, that state law passed through the legislature could ultimately direct not only participation in the program, but potentially the administration of the program at the state level. We have seen some legislation to this effect introduced in both Illinois, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina so far. Now, the bigger question that is being hotly debated in the as it pertains to this particular provision is whether or not states can develop additional criteria for eligible organizations to participate in this tax credit program. And first, this will likely be addressed or almost certainly be addressed in regulation or guidance from the Treasury. And I will note that there are pretty stark differences in statutory interpretations that anticipate how the Treasury will rule on this. Effectively, and I'll get into that here in a second. If you read the statute, there are a fairly limited amount of enumerated requirements for what constitutes a scholarship granting organization. And I've noted the three key ones of maybe the seven or so that are in statute. But in order for a scholarship granting organization to be able to have donations that donors receive credits for, they have to provide scholarships to 10 or more students who do not all attend the same school. They can spend no less than 90% of their funds on scholarships, and then they cannot provide scholarships for anything other than the eligible expenses as defined under the Coverdell Education Savings Accounts. What you'll notice in the statute is that there is no mention of whether or not states can actually add on additional requirements for scholarship granting organizations to be on that list of eligible providers. And because of that, we've seen, again, a wide array of interpretations of the statute. Some are arguing that the Treasury should interpret the statute on a limited and strict basis and essentially say that because the statute does not address the state's ability to add additional requirements, that so long as eligible organizations meet the criteria that's laid out explicitly in statute, that is effectively the sort of ceiling on what requirements can be applied to scholarship granting organizations. On the other side of it, there are folks that argue that because the statute is silent, this may give the opportunity for the Treasury to say that because states have to create a list of eligible organizations, that they may have some level of discretion over how those organizations qualify to be on that list in the first place. And this is a really significant question because it probably will be a deciding factor in for some states to participate in this tax credit scholarship program. Now, the third question, and this is related to question 2, is whether or not, outside of participation in this program, whether or not states could pass their own general laws on scholarship granting organizations that then may interact with a state's participation in the scholarship or in the scholarship tax credit program. So if a state said, we have a general regulation around scholarship granting organizations. Would that exclude a state from participating in the program, given that the state's law around scholarship granting organizations is separate from their considerations around eligible organizations for participation in the federal program? So that is something that's worth keeping in mind or thinking about in terms of the layers of state discretion in participation of this program. But like I said, we're not expecting regulations anytime soon. We have not received a certain timeline for how this will be enacted. And again, I would expect this to be decided over the course of many months into the future. I will note, and you'll see this later on as we talk about the regulatory process for the other programs, that I don't have an affirmation of whether or not the Treasury is continuing to work on these regulations during the government shutdown. So it's possible that the shutdown could delay this process, but we have seen in other contexts that because of the timeliness of the implementation of these policies, that the staff that are working on these particular regulations have been deemed essential during the government shutdown, so they're able to continue working on those regulations. But I don't have clarity on whether or not the Treasury continues to work on the regulations, or at least the preliminary regulatory process for the scholarship tax credit. Moving on, I want to talk about Pell Grants, and this is the other new novel policy in which states play a new role, and in some ways a very novel role. So as you may know, there is a new what's dubbed a workforce Pell program that essentially allows the Pell Grant to now cover short-term programs of between 8 and 14 weeks that are aligned to workforce development. And there's both a federal role and a state role. And this is notable because for the first time, there's actually a state role in federal higher education policy in a pretty significant way. That in terms of at least both this the Pell Grant, there's never really been a role for states, but now there is. The federal role for this program is making sure that eligible programs meet certain outcomes measures. So in order for a short-term workforce aligned program to be eligible for the Workforce Pell Grant, it has to have a 70% job placement rate, a 70% completion rate, and it also has to have, based on a certain metric, a value added earnings to the student's investment in that program. The states have a pretty significant role in determining which programs are eligible. So in the statute, governors, along with state workforce boards, are tasked with determining which programs would qualify based on some criteria that's laid out in the federal statute. Some of that criteria is listed here. So first, the programs must prepare students for work in a high skill, high wage job or in an in-demand industry sector, and that the programs must also lead to a recognized post-secondary credential or additional certificates and degrees. So in other words, it needs to stack onto additional opportunities for learning. And this is where there's going to be quite a bit of potential for state discretion. That definition of high skill, high wage may be left to states. Certainly the determination of an in-demand industry, also something that would be left to states. And we know that many states have passed their own definitions of a recognized post-secondary credential, oftentimes through the legislature. So it's in these areas in which states will play a pretty critical role in determining which programs are ultimately eligible for participation. Now, I think what's most notable here is that there is a very rapidly approaching implementation date for Workforce Pell. This program is supposed to go live on July 1st of next year. It's very likely, and I'll give you a little bit more detail here at the end of this presentation, that states will receive the final regulations less than 3 to 4 months before the implementation date. It's probable that, especially depending on a state's infrastructure and readiness for this program, that the full array of programs that could be eligible for this grant may not be ready on July 1st of 2026, but may become eligible as states develop their infrastructure for participating in this program. But this is a really interesting program. It's going to be very interesting to see whether or not there are enough programs that meet these definitions, and then it'll be interesting to see whether or not there's enough student demand to match with the available programs. But ostensibly, unlike other federal workforce funding streams, this is not a program that is limited by annual congressional appropriations. It is essentially a quasi-open-ended entitlement. So presuming that there are enough students that demand it, and there are enough programs that can meet the requirements both at the state and federal level, this could become a maybe not significant, but a non-trivial funding stream for students to seek different kinds of educational opportunities. You may see students choose to get through the Pell Grant a short-term credential before they enter into a longer-term higher education experience like an associate's or a bachelor's degree. You may also see students that are Pell eligible that complete their bachelor's degree in 4 years and still have a few years of Pell eligibility left. They may then seek to add on a couple of short-term credentials to maximize the value of their underlying degree. It'll be very interesting to see, again, how higher education reacts in terms of the supply of programs, but it'll also be very interesting to see which student populations and how they react to the availability of this Pell Grant for these kinds of uses. There are a few other changes to the Pell Grant that I'll go through very quickly. Most notably that if a student is in a family that owns a farm or small business, their assets up to a certain limit are now excluded from their aid eligibility, which means that many low and middle income students who were previously disqualified for Pell because of those business assets now are able to receive that. Another thing to watch here is that students who receive a full ride scholarship, that is that the combination of state, institutional, and private aid equals their total cost of attendance, and total cost of attendance includes room and board, tuition, and a number of other fees. If they receive grant aid that equals that amount, they would be ineligible for the Pell Grant. But at that point, their entire educational experience is fully covered. And I believe this was really intended to prevent full ride scholarship athletes from receiving additional funds through the Pell Grant. So it's a little bit of a cost savings at the federal level, as I understand it. Now we'll move to student loans and complete this presentation. So we did see quite, as I mentioned, most of the cost savings, or the second largest cost savings in this bill was achieved through the student loan program. And I want to note some of the changes that we saw here. So first, as it relates to all student loans, two major changes through this bill. First, institutions themselves can now set lower loan limits than are permitted by the federal government. That was previously disallowed. The institutions just have to apply that standard consistently across students within each program. So again, previously, an institution could not tell a student to borrow less than they were otherwise eligible for. Now they can. Additionally, and this matches the current policy on the Pell Grant, but a student's ability to borrow is their limits on borrowing is now prorated based on how their enrollment intensity. So in other words, if they attend college half-time or part-time, they are then only eligible for half of what they would half of the loans that they would have been eligible for. In terms of undergraduate loan programs at the federal level, there were no changes outside of those two changes that I just talked about. But we are going to see significant changes to graduate lending. Previously, graduate lending was effectively unlimited at the federal level because the Grad Plus program, the previous program, permitted students to borrow up to the cost of attendance, and the cost of attendance is set by the institutions. And so students effectively faced no limits on what they were able to borrow in order to pursue their graduate education through the Grad Plus program. That program has been eliminated, and there are now new specific limits on how much students can borrow. So students that attend a graduate program, typically a master's level program, will now have a lifetime cap of $100,000 and an annual cap of $20,500. For students that attend professional programs, which largely are going to be medical and law-based degrees, those are going to have a lifetime limit of about $200,000 and about a $50,000 annual limit. There was also changes to the Parent Plus program. Previously, like Grad Plus, parents could borrow up to the cost of attendance for their student. They are now limited to borrowing at a $20,000 a year per student with a $65,000 lifetime per student limit. In terms of state fiscal impact, this is probably fairly minimal, but there could be, depending on your institutions, an impact at the institutional level, especially on the graduate loan program. If there are institutions in your state that cost of attendance exceeds those borrowing caps, we could see some level of enrollment declines or potential revenue impacts at those institutions. It's certainly something that I would expect that most institutions are grappling with and or at least being mindful of. In terms of the federal fiscal impact, this saves about $44 billion over 10 years. And this will just be submitted for the record, but this is a very nice visual illustration of the changes of loan limits from the previous laws and the new HR 1, which I covered on the last slide, but this is a little bit helpful if you'd like to go back and review. There's new accountability related to student loans that was passed through this bill. It was referred to, I think, in early drafts as a do no harm accountability standard. And essentially what it means is that at the undergraduate level, if there is a program in which the majority of the students, if there is a program at the undergraduate level in which the majority of its graduates earn less than a similar high school graduate, those programs may be ineligible to receive student loans. Not all federal financial aid, but particularly student loans. And at the graduate level, that comparison would apply between the completers of that graduate program and a similar undergraduate program. And effectively, if a program fails this earnings test 2 out of 3 years, that it could lose eligibility for student loans. Now, there would be an appeals process there. And again, I want to emphasize this is not all federal financial aid. This is access to student loans. In terms of the state impact, there's a couple of analyses that have been put out. And at least in terms of the undergraduate level at the bachelor's degree, the initial estimates, external estimates, I should be clear, suggest that maybe 1 to 3% of undergraduate bachelor's degree programs may be at risk of failing this earnings test. But in this particular analysis that I'm sharing here in this graph, this is from the American Enterprise Institute, there's a potential that this could impact between 20 and 30% of community college programs. Now, what impact that actually has in practice will be worth watching, partly because there are many community college students are able to attend without having to borrow because those tend to be lower cost programs, and if they're eligible for the Pell Grant, they can oftentimes attend using their Pell dollars. And so there's a potential for programs to become ineligible, but it may not necessarily have a massive impact on student enrollment because students may not rely on, again, the student loan program to cover their expenses. But to the extent that programs and the students that attend them are relying on student loans to complete those programs, if a program loses eligibility, that could have a substantial impact on enrollment in that program, and then maybe more largely the institution's revenue stream. So that is certainly something to watch. And so far, we think that this could be more impactful at the community college level. But there will be, of course, lots of regulations put out about this, and I'll tell you about that here in a second. And then finally, and this is frankly the most probably significant impact for those that interact with the student loan program, is that there's been significant changes to student loan repayment through this bill. And I'll focus on two different sets of borrowers. So first, I'll just look at new borrowers who are taking out student loans starting after July 1st of next year. So starting after July 1st of next year, borrowers will have access to one of two repayment plans. And these are similar to in concept, these are similar to currently available repayment plans, but they just have new terms. So there'll be a standard repayment plan, and in this plan, students are able to, or borrowers are able to make payments effectively like a mortgage. So it's a fixed monthly payment, and depending on how much you borrow, you will make a fixed monthly payment for a certain amount of years until that loan is paid off. And you can see here that the more that you borrow, the longer that you'll pay back. There's also a new, what they call a repayment assistance plan. This is a new version of what's called an income-based repayment plan system. And you can see the calculations of how much a borrower's monthly income impacts their required monthly payments. There are many versions of income-driven repayment plans, and again, they allow borrowers to make their payments based on their monthly income. Now, what's notable about this new plan is that it subsidizes any unpaid interest that a borrower makes each month, and it also provides a matching principal payment. And what's notable about this is that for many students that are currently repaying under some of the existing income-driven repayment plans, they will make their required monthly payment based on their income, but that monthly payment would not cover either the principal and the interest payments for their loan that month. And as a result, they'll make successful payments, but they'll see their balance grow over time. And there's some estimates that this affects about 75% of borrowers. And so now that these mechanisms, which provided a subsidy of unpaid interest and a potential matching principal payment, the idea is that every student that is successfully making payments in this program will see their balance go down each month, which is not necessarily the case under the current program. For current borrowers, there's some significant changes to be mindful of. So as I mentioned, there are current income-driven repayment plans. At least 3 of those plans, the borrowers that are in those plans are going to need to choose a new plan by July 1st of 2028. And that can include this repayment assistance plan I just mentioned or another current repayment plan. This is at least probably 10 million or so or 10 million or so borrowers. So it's a significant population that's going to need to enter into a new repayment plan. There's a few other changes to some specific economic deferment provisions that are currently allowed in student loan law that I'll sort of skip over for the sake of time. In terms of state impact, I mean, this is largely going to be a federal to borrower relationship, but of course, I will note that in addition to these 10 million borrowers that need to switch into a new loan repayment program, there are an estimated 10 million or so borrowers that are either currently in default on their student loans or are nearing delinquency. And because of that, they will also need to enter into a successful repayment status. And so just for your note, there's about 42 to 43 million federal loan borrowers in the country. And if 10 million need a new plan and 10 million are not currently paying back their loans, there are at least maybe 20 million, almost half of current borrowers that will need to opt into one of these new repayment plans in order to be successfully repaying their loans. And so that is a significant undertaking that's going to be required at the federal level. And of course, we've seen some states become involved in supporting borrowers through a number of different means. This is where most of the federal fiscal savings are achieved, about $270 billion over 10 years. And finally, just in terms of, as I mentioned a few times, when can you expect regulations for these provisions? These have to go through what's called a negotiated rulemaking process. There are two negotiated rulemaking committees. One kicked off actually a couple of weeks ago. This committee is referred to as the RISE Committee. It's just a name. That committee is looking at loan limits and loan repayment provisions. As I mentioned, they met. They have been permitted to meet through the government shutdown because of the implementation timeline of these provisions. The big question, and I think one that the states would want to be aware of in this regulatory process, is that which programs will be defined as professional degrees under federal law. Again, the professional degrees have a higher loan limit of 200,000 compared to a master's degree of 100,000. So if a program is eligible for that, that could be significant. So far, the Department of Education has proposed that effectively medical degrees and law degrees would qualify as professional degrees, but they also do give themselves initially some discretion to decide and designate other degrees based on the Secretary of Education's discretion. And I know this is being debated in the negotiating rulemaking committee, which will continue to meet through November. And then for the workforce Pell and those student loan accountability provisions, probably the two that have more of a direct state impact. Those committees will meet in December and January. And why that's important is that in terms of the final regulation timeline, and why we can expect states to not have a significant amount of time to understand the regulations by the time they go into effect of July 1st of 2026. Here's sort of why that's going to be the case. So the department will finish its rulemaking on, for example, workforce Pell in early January at best. It then has to take into account all the negotiations. It then has to notice that rule. It will have to provide at least a 30-day comment window, and then it'll have to take into account those comments and then put out a final regulation. I would not expect to see a final regulation any earlier than March of next year, given this timeline, and it could be longer than that. But certainly the Department of Education is mindful that this is a significant program, that states are not going to be able to move on workforce Pell until they understand the final regulations. But again, even if the department moves as quick as they can, there's only going to be a small window for states to be prepared for this program by the time it goes into effect in July 1st of next year. So that is sort of the totality of the provisions in the HR 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that I think legislatures should be aware of. And so with that, I will end my presentation and happy to answer questions if the chair deems there's time.
Austin, thank you so much. You always have very thorough presentations. We do have a couple of members with questions. First, we have Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, this is a question. Thank you, Austin. And just for context, I am a special education teacher, so this issue is very dear to my everyday life. So last week, the Trump administration effectively gutted the Office of Special Education. Can you explain, just based upon your insights, what will that mean for the $15 billion that is appropriated through that department?
I think many of us are grappling and gathering intel from these reported cuts. My understanding as of this morning is that there are effectively two or so staff that are currently working in both the Office of Special Education Rehabilitation Service at the Department of Education. There's some speculation as to whether these will be permanent staff cuts. Certainly, I think there's going to be some lawsuits that will try to reverse these cuts. I think my understanding is that the impact there will be more on the implementation of the IDEA requirements in terms of what kinds of guidance and support that the department can provide to ensure that students are able to receive the services that they're qualified for under law. In terms of the provision of IDEA funds, I believe that the department was able to, as you may know, I'll backtrack a little bit. The department education funds are generally forward funded, and so there was a tranche of IDA funds that should have gone out on July 1st of this year, and then a larger tranche that was to be made available to states on October 1st. As I understand, that funding was made available to states on October 1st, and so while there's at least for the time being, the availability of funding, I think there are now new questions around the department's capacity to implement the many provisions of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act if these staffing cuts are sustained. And again, knowing that these were reported on Friday and folks are still trying to gather intel. I would say it's certainly a period of uncertainty, but it does seem that they have, at least for the time being, cut out most staff that do oversee the implementation of these programs.
Thank you.
We have a question from Co-Chair West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple quick questions, if that's okay. Thank you, Austin, for your presentation. It's always high quality and timely, and thank you for your expertise in digesting these federal bills for us. My question it pertains to the SNAP benefits, and I think I know what this means, but just for clarity, could you explain what the error rate means?
It's a very good question. I'm a little bit new to this as well. SNAP has not been in my particular portfolio, but as I understand it, it's essentially when states are trying to determine eligibility, they are using a number of different proxies to determine initial eligibility, but then over time they take into account more data from those recipients, and the estimation of benefits can, because of the information that they're receiving, can differ between the initial intake for that beneficiary and then the ultimate determination of their income levels and other aspects that would qualify them for benefits. And so I understand that the discrepancy between that initial intake and maybe the ultimate determination of eligibility makes up the payment error rate. At least I think that's my best guess, but I would advise, and I can follow up with a specific answer on that, just to make sure that I've got that's right. But that is effectively my understanding.
So that sounds right to me, but the way I would state it is there are a certain percentage of individuals who are initially allowed to receive benefits, but ultimately they are not entitled to those benefits, so the state's responsible for pulling back on that. So in effect, these changes to SNAP are not a cut. It's simply saying you cannot have an error rate over 6%. Because if you do have an error rate over 6%, as long as it's under 6%, there's no cut. There's no change. Is that a good way of stating that?
The states do not have a cost share of federal benefits if their payment error rate is below 6%. Yes.
So one final comment, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
See,
So in other words, as long as the state's doing what it's supposed to and making sure that the proper people are receiving the benefits and that amount, well, you can actually go over, as long as it's under 6%, we're fine. If it goes over 6%, then we're dinged. Is that a fair way to say it?
Effectively my understanding. I do understand from our staff that one of the challenges that state agencies are going to face is that they will be attempting to provide benefits while also navigating a number of new changes at the federal level in terms of changes to the program. And so it will make it, for temporarily, it's more complicated to make sure that they're understanding the federal changes and then applying them accurately, which will be a significant challenge for those state agencies to figure out, and may result in it being more difficult than usual to accurately estimate that payment.
Thank you.
just to add to Chair West's comments, it's my understanding at the time House Resolution 1, these changes were made, Kentucky had an error rate of 9%. So we've got some work to do to get back to under 6%. I see no more questions at this time. Austin, thank you so much for your presentation. Members, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to Austin. He's always very receptive and very informative. Thank you so much, and hope you get to feeling better, Austin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tipton.
Our next presentation, we have an update on dual credit. Dr. Aaron Thompson and Dr. Amanda Ellis from CPE. Please come forward and introduce yourself for the record. I will administer the oath, and then you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. Aaron Thompson, President of the Council on Postsecondary Education.
And good morning. I'm Amanda Ellis. I'm the Senior Vice President of Student Access and Success at the Council on Postsecondary Education.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please proceed. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Got some good news to report. I want to start out with a conversation that so much of of what you're going to see today has happened over the last many years with the legislature actually helping us to create that dual credit scholarship. It's mattered. But also, as we start incorporating these P20 sort of policies and processes that we put in place has mattered too. And so the couple of the first slides I'm going to start out with is where we're now ranked as far as improvement in the nation. By the way, before you say, well, we started at a low rate, no, we've been actually improving more than any other state for the last 3 years. So I wanted to make that statement before you look at it. We're now number one and have been for a little bit in the country when it comes to retention rates. That's extremely important. Now, there's a lot of things that have gone into this. We went to a performance funding model that looked at outcomes. It mattered how we did our business. When we looked at the performance funding model, as we looked at the credit hours accumulated, that mattered. Dual credit became even a more important part of this conversation that we have in Kentucky. Keep going, our persistence rates. And our persistence, retention looks at fall to fall, beginning of the freshman year to the beginning of the sophomore year. Persistence rates look at each of those years, fall to fall. So this goes all the way through to graduation rates. Once again, number one in the nation, proud of that number. And it tells us a little bit about how we're doing our business. It is our accountability system. Our 6-year completion rates, and we use completion rates because we have students starting in different places. Adult learners, we have part-time students, we have a variety of students, so not just the full-time degree-seeking student that measures graduation rates. Completion rates are more apropos for Kentucky, especially when we look at our community colleges and how we feed into the transfer system. With that in mind, we're number 2 in the country. Utah's got 3 people, so I'm not sure, we don't count them, but we're just behind Utah. But, when you look at but I want you to pay attention, if you haven't looked at your slides, look at where the national average is. In House Bill 1 of 1997, the goal at that time from the legislature and the governor's office was for us to be above national average by 2020. We were not. But happy to say we're above national average in all of those metrics that matter now, and that should be a brag point for us and Kentucky. This is a slide I'm really happy with. You've heard a lot about debt being out of control. You heard Austin give us some up-to-date stuff on what could happen in the future. We worked hard on affordability. That's been a key to the way we've looked at our strategic agenda and where campuses have gone with their strategic plans, looking at how we can get more students in and out in the length of time that matters, but also at the lowest cost possible. I should say, I'm proud to say we're at a 4-year degree again, 4.1 specifically, to let you know at our 4-year institutions. But our debt, how much our student borrows matters. So in our public institutions, you will see, I'll just make a long story short, only 2 out of every 5 of our students are graduating from college, public universities and community colleges with debt. And of those 2 in the last 5 years, we've reduced that debt by 34%, 33%. So we're happy with that too as we tell the full story. So we're getting people through faster at lower cost, and happy to say when we count our attainment rate, and we set that attainment rate at 60% of all of our students having a credential that matters by the time they graduate and go into the workforce. We're happy to say that we're now at 56.2%, and that's a year-old data. We should get our new data here soon, and we think we'll be up. I also will tell you that a part of that conversation has truly been around how then do we do what we do in a manner that they get these credentials that they can go out and get a job. So we won't count it unless they're making $33,000 and some change. And that's the living wage here in Kentucky we've calculated. The one piece before getting into it, and I'll let Amanda take us where we need to go, we wanted to make sure that we matched our attainment goal, if you will, 60 by 30, with an attainment goal for our dual credit. And that attainment goal we set a few years ago, that 50% of all of our high school students will have at least one college and one dual credit course by the time they graduate from high school. And with that in mind, there's a lot more I was going to say, but I know we're going to be short on time. We'll come back and answer any questions that you may have. But Amanda, I'll let you take it forward.
Thank you. So as you all may know, and probably do because of your incredible support for dual credit in Kentucky, is that it is what we call an early post-secondary opportunity, where high school students can take college courses to earn college credit and also earn high school credit. So it's different than dual enrollment. It's truly earning credit in both places. And so we want to share the outcomes. We know that last month you heard from Kia and the amount of funding that you have invested in this, and a lot of your questions were around outcomes and does it matter? And I can certainly say that it does. And as Dr. Thompson had mentioned, we did set our first attainment goal. We were the first state, and many of the other states are using our model to set a goal of 50% of high school students. And I'll show you where we are in that. And it's not more of the same, but it's more of our students because of the outcomes that we're seeing and the positive impact on the students who do take dual credit. So currently, as you can see, we are at 46.2%. That was from 2023. So we are making great gains. We are really jumping up each year with participation, and the anticipated enrollment this year within dual credit is growing even more. And so we are just amazed and excited about this work. We have put a lot of effort into it, and we're going to share some of those pieces. But we are at 46.2%, and by 2030, we want to be at least 50%. And that means by the time they graduate high school. And so for students to be eligible, they have to have at least a 2.5 on a 4.0 scale and meet any of the college course prerequisites. Typically, that is in mathematics and English to have a cut score to ensure that they are ready for those courses. They have to, in the CTE courses, so that's general education. In the CTE courses, it's just the course prerequisite requirements that are established by the institution offering the course. And we're going to talk about those two types. The teachers, we talk a lot about teachers teaching dual credit. This is like an adjunct if it is not faculty from that campus. So that means that in a general education course, a teacher, if they're a high school teacher, they must have a master's degree or have 18 master's credit level coursework in that discipline specific to the content area that they're teaching. So it's not just 3 random master's courses. It is very specific to advanced. That is SAC COC requirement for accreditation for the institutions. That is not something we've made up. It is a requirement. For CTE, that is determined by each post-secondary institution, depending on that career pathway and what their credentials have to be. And then, of course, out of all the general education and career and technical education, ensure that the learning outcomes established by the partnering post-secondary institution are fully implemented. So it is not a high school coming in to make up that syllabus or the student learning objectives. That is driven by the post-secondary institution, and it is the same. It is not a dual credit class versus a general education class or a dual credit class versus a career and technical education course. It is a college course, not specific just for high school students. So the two different types when we talk about general education really align with our core categories: written and oral communication, arts and humanities, social and behavioral sciences, natural sciences, and quantitative reasoning, which is your different mathematics. This is, again, not specific to dual credit, but it aligns with our core competencies and student learning objectives that are in our transfer policy. So this is aligned to the CPE policy that all campuses use. On the career and technical education side, typically they are aligned to KDE's career and technical pathways and to high demand and emerging fields. So it's not the free-for-all. I know specifically that KIA works with KDE on those pathways to ensure that they are aligned. So you can see that's in the fields of healthcare, education, manufacturing and logistics, construction, professional, scientific and technical services, aerospace and aviation, behavioral health careers. So those are approved specific pathways. One of the things that you passed, thanks to Representative Payne, who I think carried that bill last session, we are in the process of working with our advisory to review every course that is being offered to ensure that it is highly transferable. That is often a complaint, that it is not transferable to an equivalent course in the core or the general education that students need, and we are walking through those. There are many, many courses to ensure that it's very much aligned and equivalently transferred to help with their academic pathways. So we are taking that to heart, working through that with a collective group, and appreciate that support. What we are super proud of because of you is that our students, high school students, can receive up to 12 tuition-free college courses before graduation. In the budget language, you have in the past supported 4 general education courses, up to 2 courses each year during the junior and senior years, and then an additional 8 career and technical education courses, up to 2 courses each year, freshman through senior year. And this is an incredible opportunity for students. You probably noticed from 2016 on, the jump in engagement of dual credit is because there was financial support to ensure that finances were not a barrier for students to earn college credit. In addition to that, those institutions, as you very well know probably, is that not only do they participate, public and private institutions, 2- and 4-year, but they also offer a subsidized tuition rate of half the cost of KCTCS tuition, which is very affordable and is a game changer for so many students and families that we really attribute a lot of the affordability piece to. The enrollment statistics have changed significantly. If you look back at 1920 versus 23-24, it's a 41% increase in enrollment in dual credit, and hours earned are 46% increase in a very short amount of time. That is really through some incredible partnership with post-secondary institutions, KIA, K-12 systems, CPE, KDE. We are at the table, and I really think that that has opened up doors, and we are in continuous improvement for communication, transparency, and quality of these opportunities. And I think you're seeing that. And our numbers right now, although preliminary, are looking like an incredible increase yet again, especially in our 2-year institutions, who primarily provide the dual credit. Not all, but are the largest provider.
I did want to add here, as you probably have gathered, post-secondary is heavily into that senior year. We occupy that senior year now, and that's an important piece to know, that many of our K-12 institutions are, in fact, working closely with us to make sure that that dual credit is very heavily engaged in that senior year. So, and we're heavily engaged in the junior year now. So when you think about high school, each of those years, you now have to think about it with these kind of courses being on their campuses, or at least those students coming to our campuses.
That's right. For dual credit attempters versus those who do not take dual credit, if you will notice, their first year GPA in college is higher, their unmet need is lower, which is what we would hope for, and their attempted coursework is higher. So you're seeing a faster time to completion, lower cost, and stronger academic success. I will tell you, when we interviewed students on what they've done with their dual credit, why they took dual credit, I always assumed it was faster finish. We're wrong. It was faster finish. Our first generation students told us that they didn't have to take more than 15 credit hours and feel overwhelmed. They got acclimated to the campus where they were the first in their family to go, and they were successful. We also received feedback from students on our Kentucky campuses that said this allowed me to include a minor to make me more marketable and still finish on time within 4 years or less. So they're using it in very creative ways to not only just finish, but to finish in ways that they see themselves to be marketable and to really expand on their opportunities. They're not wasting it, for sure. And then this is exciting for us, predicted probability of immediate college enrollment by dual credit attempt status. So even attempting one dual credit class increases college going likelihood by approximately 19 percentage points. And this is where you see the opportunity opens the doors to show that students are worthy. They can meet rigorous expectations. They can do college level work. This is changing mindsets. This is changing relevance for those who get a little itchy and maybe have a little senioritis at the end, that there's investment in their future and that they have transcripts that are beyond high school. And so this is super important to know the impact of the predictability of college going. When we say college, remember, as Dr. Thompson will say every time you see him, we don't mean just a 4-year degree. We mean 2-year, 4-year, short-term credential training that is needed for their career choice. It opens the door for probability of them moving on.
I do want to add, and proud to say, we were having a strong decline, as you all know, in college going over the last many years. Now, in the last 2 years, we've actually turned the corner. Now we're increasing again. And if you think about 19 percentage points increase and equate that to a percent of probability, I mean, it's huge. So taking a dual credit course increases in probability. I'm a statistician, can you tell by trade? Tremendously in percent. So this is one of the things that we found to be, it came by happen chance that we found these data that pointed us in this direction. So this is one of the big impacts that I believe that we've had in turning around that college going rate.
That's right. And then the question we also get is, okay, yeah, so what? They make it, but do they stay? And so this is the other data that I think is really encouraging. If you notice second-year retention rates of first-time public students in Kentucky by dual credit participation, so the red line, if it's too small for you to see, is non-participating dual credit student versus those who participate in dual credit are the blue line, or is the blue line. So it's significantly different, even in sustainability. They belong. They see that they can do it. Their success. They have credits that they brought forward. And so it really is setting them to have a firm foundation in what they're doing. It's very exciting to see. We're very encouraged by this. And I know that our data team is working on a dual credit report. We call it 3.0 because back in 2020 and 2021, we had the impact of 4-year institutions offering dual credit. And then the next report we had was the 2-year institutions offering dual credit. And so we've been digging deeper because there's more and more questions about retention, sustainability, success. Is this really worth my investment? We are asked that all the time, and we love to answer the question. And so we feel really encouraged by that. The last thing I'll share with you, and Representative Tipton trying to be very conscientious of time on your busy schedule, but here are the supports and resources that we have put into place since within the last 5 years. And I think every one of these has had an impact on being intentional with collaboration, transparency, and taking advantage of this incredible opportunity you provide students every year. Many states envy us for many reasons, but this one especially. We did reestablish the Dual Credit Advisory Council. It does have higher education, public and private, 2-year, 4-year. It has K-12 representation. It has the agency representatives that we sit down and we look at the data. So when the legislation passed last spring, we dug into it to talk about how to better prepare dual credit coordinators, what's missing, what courses should probably not be offered, how could we be better stewards. That's what we talk about in the advisory. It's open meetings. We have our scheduled dates, and actually that advisory asked to have extra meetings. That never happens. So we are very pleased. We have a dual credit community of practice, 60 volunteers of K-12 and higher education who come together and talk about barriers and how to remove those, how to offer more. And they share ideas for recruitment. They share ideas for onboarding and to bring more students in that represent first generation, low income, and communities that don't offer as much dual credit. That's ongoing. Futurity, that we have talked about a lot, has the information you need for dual credit, but it also identifies the career pathways for our high schools. It has every one of our institutions, what our majors are, the wages earned, and I could go on about that, but it absolutely embraces that and transferability of that work. We have an early post-secondary opportunity toolkit we developed for schools to be able to use to better communicate and know what to share with families. Many families don't know that this is college credit, and so we're working on that communication to do better with families. Webinar series, we offer one per month for our dual credit coordinators. We have 30 to 60 that join in the middle of the day, and when we archive it, we have many that join, and we have specific topics that are panels of people across the state who are doing good work, the ones who would be, we would say, examples of excellence. We also have data monitoring and analysis. As you saw, we hold ourselves accountable for ensuring that we're not wasting time or money or not being transparent and authentic with our students and our families. The Kentucky Advising Academy works to build capacity for advising. We know that is lacking, and we know we need to do better. So we are constantly working with that and with our districts. And then, of course, the Commonwealth Education Continuum is a compilation of about 30 people, representation preschool all the way through workforce, that really loves dual credit. They want to know more, they want it to be better, and they want to know how we can help promote it. And I think a lot of the ideas that we've been able to do is because of their passion and the voices of Kentucky that have shared their concerns and maybe ways we can overcome some challenges with opportunities.
And there's 3 other items that we're going to have to work on deeply, I think, moving forward here. One is to ensure that every course is of the quality it needs to be as a post-secondary course. It's not a high school course, it's a post-secondary course. High school can get credit for it, but it's a post-secondary course. We also need to work diligently to align in a degree pathway where a student will know whatever course they take will end up, if they choose to, in X amount of degrees that they could accomplish. Thirdly, and Dr. Pruitt, I know you're in the audience, we have to do a better job, I think, of getting more high school teachers, quote unquote, skilled up to that SACS minimum so they can be teaching more within the high school. Those are areas that we need to work on. Now, as you all know, KCTCS brought to us last year some concerns about who's in charge of dual credit. You all have heard this now more than once. We have some power. We've used the authority we've had to push this envelope, as you well know. But there's some concerns about how do we ensure then that every campus and K-12 district will work together clearly to define those degree outcomes that we ultimately want that will help the state. Chair, happy to take any questions that you or the committee may have.
Thank you, President Thompson and Dr. Ellis. I appreciate your presentation today. We do have 8 members who have asked for questions. I'm going to cut that off at that right now because we do have an extended agenda today. And I ask members, please limit to 1 question and keep your comments concise. We're going to start off with Representative Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. As you all know, I am very passionate about dual credit and think it's one of the most impactful things that we can do for the students in the Commonwealth, and I think your presentation has proven that. And Dr. Ellis, I agree with you that we are one of the best in the nation and are a model for other states, and the reason for that is because of our investment, but also because we include dual credit and school accountability. And it's even in the performance-based funding model for career and technical education in Kentucky. So there's a lot of roads that lead students to dual credit here in Kentucky. I like that you mentioned a few areas maybe we can work on, and I completely agree with those. And which leads me to my question of, do you see or do you have any data that shows that dual credit, taking a dual credit course in high school, increases the likelihood that that student will attend a university here in Kentucky? So does it keep them in Kentucky since they have those credits here?
We can get that data. I'm not sure we have it or not. We do. We'll get that to you. Yeah.
I felt like we did, but I
didn't.
didn't.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can absolutely get that to you. And so we can, because we do really look closely at matriculation and try to increase the matriculation, but we can definitely get that to you and the members for specifically to Kentucky institutions.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
And what we didn't say that for many of our low income and underrepresented populations, if they take a dual credit course, they're actually doing better in college than their cohorts too, by the way.
Next is Representative Grossel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Thompson and Dr. Ellis, for this presentation and really congratulate you on being. I think that really speaks to the importance of the work that you're doing over at the Council on Post-Secondary Education. We've made great strides in access to dual credit, but we still hear stories all the time about students who, are losing credits when they move between institutions, and particularly four-year institutions here in the state of Kentucky. And so last session, House Bill 427 sought to strengthen how dual credit and other courses transfer between these institutions. As we continue to expand this access to dual credit, I'm wondering, how do we ensure that those courses are recognized consistently across all of Kentucky's colleges and universities so that our students don't lose progress when they have to transfer?
I'll let her give you the longer answer. I know we don't have a lot of time, but in short, HB 250 from 2010 that we were heavily engaged in that ensured transferability, seamless transferability is in place. What we couldn't account for at that time are those items you're bringing up now. And the other thing that we know is that many of our campuses may have a particular course with the same learning outcomes, but may look different in numbers and a variety of other items that we can define. They can have their numbers. We can define better if we build those degree pathways from dual credit all the way through and ensure that those pockets are there. The other thing that the bill did last year that I thought was really important, we could define the majors, if you will, and put it in, we've got futurity now, and put it in a manner that a student can easily see that and know every place it transfers in that regard in the end result. Amanda, you may want to give her a little more depth.
That was exactly what I was going to say, actually.
So that was an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Next is Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have two questions, but since I'm limited to one, Dr. Thompson, my question is for you. First of all, I will acknowledge your track record over the last 3 years is impressive, and so I applaud you on that. You mentioned that Kentucky is first in the nation for retention rate improvement, and of course, I know what retention rate is, so I understand that term. And then you said Kentucky is first in the nation for persistent rate improvement. Now, I'm not familiar with what you mean by persistent rate. So could you clarify for me what the distinction is between retention rate and persistence rate?
Sure. Retention rates look at the freshman that comes in the fall and that who's degree seeking, let me say, and who persists and comes back the next fall. That's a retention rate. We can see that rate. And as you all know, the first year is deterministic of how well they're going to graduate. But in Kentucky, we historically have had a lot of issues with the junior and senior year, people dropping out. Why, I think, is because we didn't do a good job, we're doing a lot better job now, of having employers on the front end being able to identify, having more work-based learning where they can now see that the degree matters. Even what we're doing with these employability outcomes with graduate profile moves to that very item. So persistence then is what they do until they graduate. If they return each and every year after their freshman to sophomore year, the sophomore to junior year, junior to senior year to graduation, that persistence is then, topped with a graduation rate or a persistence rate. So we've been able to increase that persistence from sophomore through the senior year faster than every other state. Yeah.
Next question is Representative Wilner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for the presentation. You said you had some good news for us, and you weren't kidding. So that's great. And I feel like my question, you've sort of hinted at this, but I just wanted to ask more explicitly. I wonder if you have disaggregated data that shows that we're not only seeing the success, but that we're also closing gaps with underrepresented areas.
Yes.
We do. Yes, we do. We track that, and that's important. When we look at those students that are coming in, maybe not with as many what I call resources, we can define those in multiple ways. We track how well we are able to give them the wraparound services to succeed. Our low-income students, students of color, students first generation, students with disabilities,
Yes.
all of those items we can disaggregate. We do. Now, I will say student with disabilities, the limit there is truly how they, especially the federal definition, how well the campus is tracked. But we do all of that because it's important for us to be able to say, okay, you guys are doing well here, but we're going to have to double down in this particular area.
Yep.
Dual credit has become a heck of a feeder process, I'll call it that. So it's important that we continue to do that.
Yeah, and just to briefly add to that, we actually, and we can pull the data for the student populations, we are actually closing gaps. And I've been in K-12 previously a long time, and it is hard to close gaps, but we are not losing momentum with the all, but we are seeing a better representation of Kentucky's student body. The other piece is we are specifically working with the directors of special education in our different co-ops, and we've reached out to all of our resource directors on campuses to start connecting them with resources and increase, hopefully, participation with students with disabilities and the resources that are available on all of our campuses. There's just a real void of knowledge, and so we are actually in the process of doing that now and connecting dots with the new community of practice coming up.
Thank you. I would love to see that disaggregated data on the.
We're happy to.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Next we have,
Congratulations.
next we have Representative Emily Callaway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, Dr. Ellis, over here to your right.
You are.
Hi.
I couldn't find you.
Thank you all for the time today and for the good news. I am curious about the scholarship program for the dual credits.
Yes.
So what are the requirements for that? What does that look like? And then how is that covered? You've got 12 tuition-free options, college courses. Can you give me a little bit more details about the scholarship?
Sure. So everybody is eligible. The dual credit for general education is a minimum 2.5 unweighted GPA. And then for English and mathematics, most of the institutions have a minimum cut score on an assessment to make sure that they are ready for the mathematics or the English. But there are no cut scores for science and social studies and the other core areas. And so what happens is that the agreement occurs between the district and the institution, and then the district notifies or works with the student to sign up for their MyKia account. And they are then submit what courses they take, and then Kia will then turn around and basically pay the bill for those courses. That's why they have 2 per junior year and 2 for senior to keep up with the masses, because there are literal thousands of students. And so they have a database to show how many gen ed they've taken junior and senior year. And then for career and technical education, if they're in one of the approved pathways, they can start as early as their freshman year in high school. And so that information is usually sent to confirm with Kia, and then Kia will check off, or Becky Gilpatrick will check off the information and then pay the bill to the institution on behalf of the student. And so they can get on the MyKia, their account personally, and see what they've used, and it's all right there. And so those partnerships are really important, and that's why we're always trying to improve the efficiencies of those as well, because if there's a wrong number put in, or a student selects the wrong course, or however it is done, there's definite bumps to making sure that that's accurate. But they've done very well to manage the masses of getting those scholarships. And so that's typically how it works. Did that help answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, General Assembly supplies those dollars, but I do want to
Yes.
say that many families, I'm a father that all of his kids took dual credit. The campuses will provide it at the lower cost after
Yes.
they're done with this, or in some cases, no cost. So if students want to really get more, they've got the opportunity to do that way after the scholarship runs out.
Yes.
Next question comes from Senator Williams.
Thank you very much. I'm always concerned about the advanced students getting the most work, and I was looking in the mid-1800s, the average age of college entry was 14 to 15, which means there was a lot of 12 and 13 that were actually entering college back 150 years ago. And I see that we can take 2 courses each year for career and technical from freshman through senior. But for general education courses, that's only junior and senior. Is that a fiscal, regulatory? Why can't you take 4 years of general education courses?
So that is specific to the scholarship. And so that is just how it is written in, and Kia can answer the question on the junior senior piece. But if you want to take dual credit and it is offered, or there's a junior college opportunity in your community, students can take it earlier. It just, a lot of them sometimes will say if they're ready, they take it. If they are not ready for college courses, they don't. But the scholarship is what limits the junior senior. If they don't use the scholarship, they can still take dual credit anyway. It really depends on the partnership. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So is that statutory, regulatory limit, or fiscal?
I believe
limitory?
it's statutory is that correct, Representative
Yeah,
Tipton?
there is statutory
the
language on that. Actually, the statutory language only allows 2 general ed in junior and senior year. Budget language allows the 4 courses over the junior and senior year.
And I want to add another thing to it, because you're asking 2 things, in my opinion. One is, why couldn't they take it? Well, the way the high school curriculum is set up and the way the college curriculum is set up, if you're taking an English in college, you must have had all those English courses taken in high school to take a college course, as an example, in many cases. So some of it is alignment with those areas, if you will. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be better alignment. That's not my point. But the post-secondary faculty and the high school faculty have agreed that some of the courses that they take in the gen ed area are courses like college algebra, as an example, that they may not have had in the freshman year the algebra enough to take that course.
Yeah, I'm talking about the top 3% or the top 10%.
Yeah, I hear you.
And they're being bored right now. Yeah. We need to make sure they're advanced. Thank you.
I will add that we are seeing a growing number of high school graduates also graduate with associate degrees. Growing number of that.
Yes.
Next, Representative Camille.
Thank you, Chair Tipton. This was an amazing presentation, and again, gives me hope. And there were so many statistics, and looking at all the different screens, I may have missed this if you said it, and if I did, I apologize. But are you seeing a greater participation in dual credit for either college, going down the college track, or more for CTE, or is it kind of equal?
It kind of varies, unless my data folks tell me otherwise. But usually we see a lot of times students will combine it too and take advantage of the full. So they'll do a career pathway and earn a credential or an associate's degree, as Representative Tipton talked about, in addition to they take gen ed courses. So then when they come into college, they're well ahead regardless, or they can jump right into the workforce and be ready to skill up. And so it is really a variety of ways. We could go back and look to see which ones matriculate to where it is, and we could probably pull that on their matriculation rates of where they go. But so many of them double up. So for an example, many students who are interested in healthcare services, maybe they want to be a nurse, they go on and do the M&A, and they also take medical terminology, and they take anatomy, and so they're getting dual credit through those. And then they're also taking gen ed. So when they get into school, they have very few courses to take before they are eligible for nursing classes and to get to that level 1 and go after level 2. So I think it's kind of a variety of what they do to take advantage of that.
But to answer your question specifically, there's going to be more in gen ed for this reason, because the career and technical only happens in post-secondary with our community and technical colleges in most cases. And even in the community and technical colleges, more than half of those fall within the gen ed categories, right? So just pure numbers wise, that would be the case. If you look at the percentage of those that are interested in the track toward that, then you'll see an even out process. Does that make sense?
That makes sense,
Because
yeah.
it's proportional in the nature of the opportunity, if you will.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our final question or comment on this segment comes from Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working me in, and I will be quick. Dr. Thompson, you all spoke a little bit about special education student. Had the opportunity recently to look at the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation budget and the significant amount of dollars that are spent on students with special needs. With the recent shutdown on bringing new people into OVR programming, have you all noticed any impact with incoming freshmen this year, and are any of the colleges and universities doing anything to help accommodate those students while they wait for funding?
Well, I'm going to answer your question because we don't know that data yet, but let me tell you, the presidents and others are saying there's, once again, we've been ticking up every year on this, as you all know, more with substantial behavioral and other sorts of needs. So whether there's a direct correlation between that or what's happening, I don't know yet. I can't answer that question. What I can tell you, though, there is much more of substantial need that we have to spend money on wraparound services now than we would have ever thought about doing 5 years ago even. So that, and I hadn't even thought about looking at that direct correlation. And it's probably because this year's the only year we'll have whether or not that will be affected so far. But we will track that.
President Thompson, Dr. Ellis, thank you for your very informative presentation. Next, we have Kentucky State University on the agenda. If you, Dr. Akapa, if you and your presenters will come forward, I'll give a little preview. President Akapa had come to me and made a request to be on the agenda. I'm sure the members are aware that we did pass Senate Bill 77 during the 25 session, and President Akapa is going to come to us and his team to make a request for a carve-out on that. So President Akapa, if you and your presenters will identify yourself for the record, everybody come forward and identify yourself for the record, and then I will present the oath.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, esteemed members.
Make sure your microphone is on, pull close to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, esteemed leaders. My name is Kofi Akapo, KSU President.
Please present you. Go ahead.
Good morning. So glad to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. Committee, my name is Marcus Bernard. I serve as Dean for the College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Avinash Tope. I'm the associate. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Is the green light on?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. It has to be that green. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Avinash Tope. I'm the Associate Dean for Academics at the College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources at Kentucky State.
Would each of you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
President Opaka, if you and your team please proceed.
We have some slides. I don't know if they can be.
100%.
It's going to be right there. You want to click on that one?
Oh, thank you. Well, again, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to be before you this morning. I know the time is precious for you, but before I let my colleagues delve into this presentation, I just want to make some point here. Land-grant is a separate entity within Kentucky State University. It's funded by federal government, allocation from federal government, and a part of it matched by the state. So land-grant doesn't depend on the university. And the KSU is the second land-grant institution in the Commonwealth. Land-grant's mission is to do research, extension, and education. And through these three components, we served all 120 counties in the Commonwealth, and we bring in millions of dollars to our communities. So this program, the carve out, is just going to help us raise the profile of the university, bring in more money, and it will not cost the Commonwealth any penny. Two, land grant has 2 scholarships that will pay the tuition fully for students. And the program we're asking for is not offered, are not offered in Kentucky at all, even around the Commonwealth. Our aquaculture program is a program of distinction, one of the best in the nation. Dr.
Yes. Quick statement, and then I'd like to bring my 2 colleagues or 2 team members, Dr. Gabor Medine and Dr. Andrew Ray, representing agriculture and natural resources and aquaculture and aquatic sciences, to present on the program. But to echo Dr. Acapo's words, this program, these 2 PhD programs, will provide the pathway for KSU to reach R2 status on the Carnegie Research University rating. So these PhD programs are very significant for us, and as the president said, there is no additional cost. And so with that, I'd like for Dr. Gabor Medine and Dr. Ray to come and talk to you about these 2 programs, as they are the content experts.
Please come forward and identify yourself for the record. Make sure that green light is on, the microphone's pulled close to you. Just please introduce yourself briefly.
My name is Dr. Andrew Ray. I'm the chair of the School of Aquaculture and Aquatic Science at Kentucky State University.
My name is Mahatma Gabramardin. I'm the chair of the School of Agriculture and Natural Resources at Kentucky State University.
Please raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please proceed.
First of all, thank you very much for having us. It's an honor to be here with you today. Thank you for your continued support, especially for the current biennial funding resolution. KSU is seeking a carve-out bill within its USDA-funded land grant program. And your support for this bill is extremely important. We have 2 specific PhD programs that we'd like to request. One is in agroecology and sustainability under Dr. Gabor Medine's school, and the other is in aquaculture and aquatic science, which is under my purview. This will lead to a much higher skilled workforce in these 2 critical areas. It'll help us retain students that we are currently losing from our master's degree programs and others. We are becoming, and we are the leader in some of these next generation agriculture innovative areas. And this will help further that.
Yeah, the impetus for this PhD program is actually the fact that we train master's level students, and year after year we see them leaving the state and apply for PhD program elsewhere. And came the question, why are we doing that? Why Kentucky is actually losing the best and the highly skilled professionals to outside of Kentucky. So we have been struggling with this question, and we looked at our cost of operation of the master's program and graduation rate. It is at the top. Almost all the master's students that enrolled graduate within 2.5 years. And what they do after that, they leave Kentucky and apply to bigger universities. So we have been a net loser of highly skilled workforce. Then came the question, what do we do? I guess we talked internally, and we have a compelling set of compelling reasons to provide to you. One is if Kentucky is going to remain the premium state in terms of producing highly skilled workforce, we have to train highly specialized PhD holders. We're not asking too much of funding from the state. It's going to be a self-sustained program. From the get-go, it will be a net. We want to be a program that sustains itself, meaning we will generate our own revenue from different sources, mainly from federal and other sources. So the state funding line will be very minimal. Of course, there is the question of highly skilled workforce pipeline. Like I mentioned, we will want to we want Kentucky to be, especially our school, Kentucky State University, to produce from undergraduate program to masters and to PhD, so that we don't lose highly skilled workforce. Of course, it generates. There is a compelling case to make in terms of economic viability of the program. Highly skilled workforces are the cornerstone of Kentucky agriculture, and we want to capitalize on that. Is the program financially sustainable? I think we will provide you the numbers if we're requested, that it will be sustainable, that we make sure that it is self-sustained and financially viable PhD program. And most importantly, as a land grant program, this PhD aligns with the universities, Kentucky State University's strategic plan, as well as the objective of land grant institutions, that is teaching highly skilled workforce. We do research, highly competitive research, to the extent that we brought to the tune of $25 million over the last 5 years in terms of federal funding, and of course serving our stakeholders across Kentucky. Kentucky State presence is in almost every county, so we know our stakeholders and we communicate very much. In terms of the program designation, the whole discussion of PhD came from the fact that we embarked on providing master's program, and then came the question, why then? What is next? So we looked at all the SIP courses that are out there. So this program will be unique in a sense that it is the only HBCU that will provide this PhD program. We are very proud that we hopefully with your support that we'll have this PhD program, and it will be a magnet for our stakeholders to come to Kentucky State University and get their PhD program. So very briefly, the area of focus that this program is going to rely upon are, we talk about agriculture. I mean, agriculture in the 21st century. It's going to rely on AI and innovative technology. So the courses will be highly innovative and technology-oriented program of disciplines, from crop science to insects to animal science, you name it. This program is going to be a distinguishing program in terms of producing the highly skilled workforce.
If I can add, as you all know, the weather these days is not what we used to. And this program is going to help us do research and train our farmers on climate resiliency. Dr. Ray.
Thank you. Yes, aquaculture and aquatic science is a very unique program in the state of Kentucky. It's the only one of its kind in the state. It's the only one of its kind in the region, actually. It's Kentucky State's program of distinction, as recognized by Dr. Thompson's organization. Aquaculture is the fastest growing sector of agriculture in the world, and other countries are leading the way in this charge. And right now, the United States imports over 80% of its seafood. And there's some products that are even higher than that, such as shrimp. And I will note that in April of this year, Donald Trump signed an executive order, the Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness Bill, and it mentions specifically aquaculture. So this is on his and the federal government's radar in a big way. It's unfortunate, but our wild fisheries simply cannot supply our demand. It's something that we would like to work together with, of course, wild fisheries, that is. But you'll maybe remember that Senator Kennedy from Louisiana gave a demonstration on the Senate floor last month regarding imported shrimp from Indonesia that were actually radioactive, and they'd been shipped to Walmart and Kroger. Some of that was in Kentucky. They found it right here in Kentucky. So this is a big problem. It's a $20 billion trade deficit that we have with seafood, over $20 billion a year. And fish is one of the healthiest things you can eat. The American Heart Association recommends 2 meals per week because of the heart benefits that it has. It has the good omega-3 fatty acids, and it's very low in saturated fat. And this fits really well with Robert F. Kennedy's Make America Healthy Again initiative. In fact, things like cesium radioactivity, we find antibiotics in imported products, we find hormones, environmental contaminants on a regular basis. The FDA is finding these in imported seafood. And I think we have a really unique opportunity here to work on this and to address this issue. We have an amazing program here. It's got the roots, it's got the bones already built, and I'm ready to lead it. And the PhD program will really help establish our leadership in this area. There's other aquaculture programs in the country. Yeah, they're on the coasts. You know, most Americans live here in the interior states of this country, and Kentucky State University, therefore, is uniquely situated to help with that distribution. As you know, there's many companies investing in our state right now because of the networking and interstate and other pipelines that we have to distribute products throughout the interior parts of this country and other areas. We are the leaders in marine aquaculture, actually. We can even grow fresh seafood, marine seafood, right here in Kentucky. We just harvested 190 pounds of shrimp last week from a tank, marine shrimp, fresh. The feed comes from a feed mill in Pennsylvania. The shrimp come from a secure hatchery in Florida, and it's all American, all domestic, highest quality shrimp you can get. In fact, we're going to be cooking some next week. If you look in your folders, there's an invitation to our little cookout on the 23rd. It should be. So yeah, thanks again so much for having us here, and I appreciate any questions or concerns you may have.
Well, thank you all for your presentation. We do have some questions. The first, Senator Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I'm actually looking at, my understanding is you want a doctoral program that's only for land-grant universities to get funds from other sources outside the state, either federal funds or private partnerships. And I see that, I'm looking here, there's a lot of money out there. President Trump signed an executive order supporting HBCUs, and he felt it was such a priority that he moved that program to the White House so that he could assign a priority to that program. He gave $100 million in that for scholarships, research, and centers of excellence at HBCU land-grant institutions. And that's on top of $500 million that was already there. So my question to you is, if we don't go ahead and authorize this program from land-grant universities, are there federal funds or private, and there's a private partnership he also established, private money that will not be able to come into the state of Kentucky or into your institution?
Well, thank you, Senator. Yes, we have scholarship money that we're not able to spend all because of us not having programs like this. So, yes. And the second one is during our last May graduation, I polled 41 of our graduate students. If the state approved this program, would they stay in Kentucky? All say yes. But because we did not get the program, all of them moved to Georgia.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to them staying here next year.
Our next question is from Leader Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Kopov, good to see you again, sir. Thank you all for the presentation. Just following up on Senator Williams, just real quickly, just so I could clarify, you said that this program would not cost the state any money, correct? You'd be able to draw down federal funds for scholarships.
Yes.
Second point, Mr. Chairman, just really quick, you said this will be the first PhD in these two areas for HBCUs. How many students do you currently have in your graduate program that you feel like would retain and stay if this is offered? And then also recruiting wise, how many estimation of the graduate school programs are there nationally that you feel you could recruit from to bring to Kentucky State for a PhD in these two areas?
So thank you, Senator Weiss. That's the growth we have seen in our graduate program already. So aquaculture alone has about 23, 25 who are about to graduate, and the rest in agriculture and natural resources. So with this program, we will retain most of these students, and they will not leave the states. And going back to your first question, it will cost the Commonwealth $0. And we have 2 scholarships to fund the education for the student. When Tennessee State did something similar to this, the president told me they have seen double-digit growth in enrollment as well in their graduate.
And how many PhD programs are there nationally in these two areas that your students right now are currently going to?
They tend to go to University of Georgia, but I can look for that and get it to you.
That'd be great. Thank you all.
Ours tend to go to Auburn. They have the biggest program.
Thank you.
Yeah, but what I might add also, what makes this agroecology PhD program distinctive from other traditional agricultural program is that we're trying to merge the principle of ecology into agriculture. That is, how do you make the future agriculture in Kentucky more sustainable by applying those principles? So traditionally, I'm a soil scientist, so the way they train us is just to focus on soil or animal science. But this agroecology is the merging of 2 disciplines in such a way that graduates of this program would be able to think in a broader context of how do you make agriculture be as productive as it can be and also as sustainable as it could be. So, yeah.
And Senator Weiss, if I may add to that, KSU is the only university that works closely with a company in southeast Kentucky that has claimed over 10.5 million acres of land in cold area. So this type of program will help us do more of this type of activity throughout the Commonwealth.
Next, we have Co-Chair West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Wise asked most of my questions, all of them except one. How many students is KSU currently graduating in the land grant component of the university?
Last May, we have over 40.
40 students?
Yeah, graduate.
And this program is hoping to attract at least 28 more that will go away, but for sure have a possibility of coming back. Your hope is to do hundreds?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
As we're growing the program, yes, eventually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I may also add that we're very cautious in launching this program. We don't want to break the system. So what we will do is actually we will start with a small number of courses and see how they progress. Our projection shows that we start with maybe 10 to 15 PhD students, and then we see how they progress toward this or finishing time of 4 years. And then depending on our financial situation, we can increase that number. But
thank you.
We are cost conscious.
Our final question from this segment comes from Representative Rourke.
Thank you, Chair. President Acapulco, thank you so much for presenting today. I mean, Kentucky State University is well known in its agricultural credibility and advancement. So I just want to thank you for the presentation and also say that I think we all can get excited about healthy seafood and the value-added nature of being able to provide that from a U.S. market standpoint. But you have, been before us before to talk about the financial situation of the university. Can you share how this might help the financial viability moving forward for the university?
It's going to generate more revenue to the university. As I said, we have the scholarship, but we have to give it to students to bring that money, to keep that money. If we don't give it to students, we cannot keep that money. So we do have the scholarship. This program will allow us to tap into the scholarship money that will come to the university.
Thank you.
And if I could expand just a little bit on your point, the fresh seafood angle is one of our angles. We also, the School of Aquaculture and Aquatic Science, more largely, we work with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife quite a bit. We're doing some genetics work with them to differentiate different strains of largemouth bass. Largemouth bass is the most popular sport fish in Kentucky, and if you look at that industry, the sport fishing industry in Kentucky, it's over $1 billion a year of revenue when we talk about boats and gas and all the like. We're looking at a partnership with Meridian that's moving into Frankfurt soon, and they are taking distillers grains from Buffalo Trace and converting them into usable products for fish food. That's their primary objective. And then we're seeing investment, of course, in the food sector as well. So there's a lot of wheels turning in this area.
Thank you all so much for your presentation today, and I'm sure if members have additional questions, they can reach out to you. Next on our agenda today, we have a presentation on accreditation, and we're very fortunate to have President Stephen Pruitt, who is in his new role as president of SACS. I know we often talk about SACS, so I thought it would be good for us to learn a little more about what SACS is and what they do. And I appreciate President Pruitt being here today. I think you know the drill, so if you will make sure that green light is on, identify yourself for the record, I'll swear you in and you can proceed.
Stephen Pruitt, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, Commission on College.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Well, please inform us what SACS is and what you do, Mr. President.
Well, I'm happy to take that oath and to report that I've also not had a duel in the last 30 days. It is great to be in Kentucky, always great to be here in the Bluegrass. I was given the option to do this by Zoom, and I'm like, well, no. Of course, I've got to be here in Kentucky. So I am excited to be here to share with you a little bit about what's going on. I will apologize a little bit for my voice. It kind of goes in and out. I will tell you that I was at a football game last Saturday. I will not tell you which one, but I will say that if the SEC
Georgia Auburn, I guarantee it.
Well, I was going to say if the SEC officials were regulated by SACS COC, there would be an investigation. We'll just leave it at that. But we are just a great honor to be here. I'd like to introduce our Director of Legal and Government Affairs, Ray Borden, who's sitting right here behind me. She will be somebody that you will all get to see and know in the future. I'm going to go through a little bit about who we are, but also I want to talk more about where we're going. I know that we're a little short on time, so I'll go through this as quickly as possible. So the first thing that I always like to point out is really the hallmark of American accreditation is built on peer review. We are committed to that. It's something that allows for institutions to review and give feedback and hold one another accountable. SACS COC is run by and is managed by our members, the presidents of our institutions. So a hallmark of this, which I think really distinguishes American accreditation in general from that across the rest of the world, is the idea of peer review itself. So very quickly, I'll go through three things that I think it's important for you guys to know. First of all, the traditional purposes of accreditation is about quality. We've been around for a little over 130 years. And we were first created not by the federal government or not to disseminate funds, but because institutions wanted to ensure a level of quality. So we make sure that we are in a role that we are holding an accountability and to hold a high level of quality. I will say that as we progress forward on this, we are making sure that we are looking at rigor and trying not to establish rigor mortis with some of our institutions. We hold high standards. In fact, I think SACS COC has, in years past, been the gold standard for what we provide. And we're a gatekeeper to federal funds for institutions to be able to hold those or to accept those federal funds. The three dimensions to that U.S. accreditation, I think, that really make us difference is that it is a non-governmental, self-regulated peer review system. All of the decisions are made by peer review. As president of SAC-COC, I work with all these folks, and there are things that I can do to move things ahead. But at the end of the day, these are all decisions based on our membership. I will say, sitting here in this wonderful place, that I'm happy to partner with President Thompson on finding more teachers. We actually have in our policy to give some wiggle room, and I'm telling you, we'll find a way to help institutions certify their teachers without having to go through all the 18-hour stuff, because we believe that dual enrollment is a very high-quality way for our students to access higher ed. So at the end of the day, what so much of this matters is the candor that happens between institutions. That when they come together and they give each other a review, it's not, pat them on the back, oh, good job. I have only attended one of these meetings. It was in June. I was not even on the clock yet, but I went. And I can tell you, they're pretty rough on one another. Higher ed is a culture built on argument, and they know how to argue. It's pretty effective, and it's pretty amazing to watch in many ways. Just as a practical matter, the structure of how SAC-COC works, we have the College Delegate Assembly, which is all the CEOs or all the presidents or chancellors of all of our member institutions. This is by far the body that makes our policy decisions. They'll vote on our standards. We are working more with trying to engage them even more than what they currently are. For me, coming from a state agency, where I've been a state agency guy for most of my last 20 years, it's been, I want to do more with our state agencies. In fact, probably Dr. Thompson's gotten tired of seeing my name pop up on his phone because we are trying to do more to engage there. We have an appeals committee, an arbitration committee. We have a board of trustees that does some of the more granular work. And, of course, we have an executive council, which is a member from each of our 13 states. To put it, for those of you who are SREB folks, it's very similar to our board versus our executive council there. So it's an opportunity for us to be able to still move some things forward by having a smaller group that gets to review that first. But still, at the end of the day, that College of Delegate Assembly is who ends up voting on the majority of our policy work. We also have committees on compliance and reports, our CNR committee. These are both elected and appointed members. These are the groups that actually review all the materials that each institution provides every 5th year or 10th year of their accreditation. Again, based on time, I won't go through this a great deal except to say this. The principles of accreditation are our standards. When I talk about the principles, it's the same thing as talking about the, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've forgotten what we call the standards here in Kentucky, but our Kentucky academic standards. Sorry, it took me a second. I guess it's been a minute. Actually, you know what? I was talking to Jennifer Fraker on the way in here. It dawned on me, 10 years ago today, I was driving from Bethesda, Maryland to Frankfurt to start my first job tomorrow as commissioner. So I couldn't believe it's been 10 years. I thought, wow, that's been really time that's flown. But you can see the way this works. We provide all sorts of, we provide the standards. We have a ton of informational materials. Institutions develop materials to prove that they are meeting those standards. There's a peer review and evaluation process that goes through an off-site committee, does a review. Then they go on-site and actually do a review on-site so they can ask questions. And then there's a CNR committee in the Board of Trustees that do a final review of those materials. The decision about the accreditation status is then provided by the Board of Trustees. And this is, I just like this graph. The there's this belief that SAC, COC, and other accreditors are sort of a hammer and everything's a nail. But this is actually an example of what happened in 23. In the off-site visits or in the off-site committees, they actually found 990 non-compliant findings. That's a lot. But then when they went on-site, that narrowed to 94 because of the conversation and what was able to go on back and forth with the back and forth between the committees and the institutions. By the time it got to the board where they were asked to give additional information, only 15 findings were found of noncompliance in 23. So there's a lot of give and take. It's not just it's either right or it's wrong. It's actually a lot of working with institutions because at the end of the day, we want our institutions to be successful. And that's something that will carry through in my presidency as well. So where do we go from here? I have been on the job. Today is October the 14th. So about 65, 70 days, something like that. And it's been pretty wild and fast. Most of you that know me know that I was, K-12 for most of my career. So I'm kind of learning a lot about higher ed, learning a lot about accreditation. But my accountability background has helped a lot. My time in Kentucky helped a lot. In fact, I think you may even see some things that I'm about to talk about that you go, that looks familiar. If you were around and you were watching what was going on when I was commissioner, you go, oh, that might look like something that he learned here. This is no shock. If you've known me for any length of time, my pillars that I'm bringing to SAC COC is we will be about student opportunity. Students first always. Every question that my staff gets from me is, how does this affect students? Second thing is we still have to be about achievement. We can't be about just letting people, drive through the parking lot and we throw degrees in their windows. The degrees have to mean something. And we have to be about integrity. At the end of the day, there's no reason for me to do anything in my life if it doesn't have integrity with it. So going forward, I think what we want to do is we want to provide leadership. We want to provide service with accountability. Notice that's very deliberate. It's not accountability with service. It's service with accountability. And, again, if you've known me for any length of time, you've heard me say this a million times. I'm more about building shareholders than stakeholders. I'm more about trying to build a common vision and us all try to move toward that. I think the future role, I think we have been the gold standard. I think it's time for us to take that mantle back very clearly. I think we need to be an influencer in the world of higher ed and actually be better about our relationship with our state legislatures. In fact, as an aside, similar to what we did at SREB, I'm going to be instituting the first ever Legislative Advisory Council for SAC COC. So some of you be watching your emails because it's going to be coming. But I think it's important that there is a relationship with our state legislatures. And we want to be innovators. I do not take any job with just wanting to keep status quo. So we want to push innovation. So about 2 weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago now, I released my first 100-day plan. This is what's going to happen in the first 100 days of my new administration. We're having a greater commitment to communication because I think that while we have communicated okay, we could be much better. I've just hired the first director of communication ever in the history of SAC COC, and we are committed to that. For instance, this may sound like a small thing, but I think it's pretty important. When information has gone out to college presidents, people like President Thompson doesn't get copied on that. He does now because we want to make sure that people are very clear about the directions that we're headed. I have called for an immediate revision of our standards. That is something that would have come up in the next year, but I wanted to do it immediately. Frankly, I think we have too many. I think we can cut those down. I think we can streamline them. I also think that it's important that we start to look at things like how we are managing workforce expectations. Obviously, there's a difference with the workforce contribution at an R1 institution versus a community and technical college, but at the end of the day, we want all of our kids to go to work because we don't want them living in our basement eating Cheetos. And so we want them to get out and get into the workforce. And so we're going to be looking at how to do that. As part of that, for the first time, we have a committee who's going to be focused specifically on finance and a committee focused specifically on workforce. So that as this happens, our accreditation standards reflect what needs to be happening in our country. Also, this is going to be one of the first charges that we're going to have for our Legislative Advisory Council, to look at these new standards to ensure that there's no bias and that those standards are what are going to meet the needs of our state policymakers as well as the state institutions. We're modernizing our processes. It's probably been a minute since we've done that. So we are doing a complete soup to nuts review of all processes that we do, from communications to how we do our fifth year and our reaccreditations. One big thing that if you've ever talked to anybody at the institution, you may have heard them talk about something called substantive change, or sub-change for short. And it is just a bear. There are 52 categories. There will not be 52 categories in December. We're going to be majorly cutting that back. And even already, our executive council approved for me to be able to approve 7 of those so that it doesn't have to wait for board approval. So we're increasing turnaround time, or decreasing turnaround time by as much as a month, just by small steps like that. We want to support all institutions. We want everybody to know. So Thursday, for instance, we're having our first ever R1 Summit. So the biggest research institutions are coming to Atlanta for us to have a conversation with them, because along with that principles of accreditation, I have a tendency to believe that one size should not fit all. So we want to have a conversation of how can we better support all institutions, whether they're R1s, community college, specialty colleges, whatever. We want to be able to provide that support. This is a little bit of insider baseball, but we've looked at reimagining our quality enhancement plan. If you've talked to anybody at an institution, they may have actually talked about the QEP a little bit and may not have said anything real nice about it. And so we have actually set that into a study period, because I heard enough during my first month on the job to say, we need to take a look at this. And so we've moved it into a hold harmless. We want to encourage innovation, so we're creating what we're calling a sandbox for innovation. We are going to have some real conversations about how could we stimulate innovation in institutions where if they come to us and say, these 3 standards are barriers to us doing this, then we sit down and say, okay, well, then let's have an interchange. If you want this, what's the accountability on the back end? So if we lower the barrier and we say, we'll excuse you from these, what are you going to give your students in your community in exchange? And then we're going to continue to expand membership options. The last thing I'll say, which kind of is an overlay of all of this, is a change in philosophy, I believe, in accreditation in general for us, but I think even nationally. Those of you that were around me very much back between 15 and 18 when I was commissioner heard me say a very similar thing. I think accountability can be both a stick and a carrot. So one of the things that we are going to build into our accountability system is the opportunity for institutions to show distinction in things like workforce, in things like affordability, in things like partnership with high schools and employers, in things like the roles they play in their communities. So we don't want to be a floor. We actually want to be a nice modern townhome that has multiple floors that allows people to live at the place that they want to live. But overlaying this idea that it's not just that we're a hammer, we want to be a full toolbox. And so there's a pretty significant change in philosophy, I think, that we're embracing here as we move forward. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions. And thank you again for your time. Chair Tipton, Chair West, always a pleasure, and thank you for letting me be here today.
Well, Mr. President, appreciate your presentation today. As always, we have questions at IJCE. I have 5 on the queue, so I'm going to limit to that for time. First is Representative Clines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Dr. Pruitt. I'm just going to be quick. It's something that's been bugging me for a couple years. The 18 credit hours of discipline-specific content for GEs. I would just like to request maybe that they get some experience for their years of teaching.
Done.
All right, thank you. I would hate to teach U.S. history for 10 years and then be told I have to go back and take 6 more classes.
So technically, in
Thank
the
you.
policy, there is already that availability. The institution just has to give credit for those years taught, and in what they submit to us, there's a way forward to be able to say this teacher is available to teach this course for this reason. So technically that has been in the policy, but I don't know that it's been as embraced as what I'm wanting to embrace it. So done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's quick and easy.
Yeah.
Representative Bratcher.
Thank you. To your right.
Oh, sorry.
So appreciate your presentation. I'm really excited to hear about some of the changes that you're looking at in being more innovative, because my dealings with SACs has been that they can be very restrictive and limit entrepreneurial innovation and creativity at the college level. And what it does is it reduces the possibility, or it reduces the desire of the universities or colleges to want to be innovative. And we know that innovation and new products and new designs is what really drives the economy. So I'm excited to hear that. I'd like to, if you have some time, maybe we can sit down and chat a little bit about some opportunities.
I would love that. Yeah. And that is, I want that to be the hallmark of what we are and what we do, because I've heard the restrictions and stuff a lot since I accepted the position, and I don't want us to be known for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next is Senator Thomas.
Dr. Pruitt, it's good to see you again.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
And I want to tell you that SACS is very fortunate to have you as its president.
Thank you.
My question is a bit more serious, Dr. Pruitt. I know going back to the 1980s, one of the guiding principles in SACS by which they judged universities and colleges was the value and emphasis that the universities and colleges placed on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was part of the accrediting standards by which schools were judged. Now, my question to you is, in light of current federal policy that has discredited the use of the language diversity, equity, and inclusion, does that still remain a guiding principle in SACS, or because the fact that SACS generally deals with Southern colleges and universities, has that gone by the wayside now in light of current federal policy?
Actually, SACS COC is one of the few accreditors that never had DEI in its standards. It's actually not been in the standards for the last, well, I've not really looked at the standards beyond the last 20 years, but there's actually not a deliberate piece of that in the standards. So it's not part of it. It's not really been part of the conversation about what's going on at the federal level. For us, it's more about are the institutions providing the supports and opportunities for students that get them all through to persist to a degree, certificate, or whatever. But that's not really been part of the work that we've done at this point. And like I said, we were actually, even though it's been bantered around for a while that SACS COC had that in our standards, it actually has not.
Our final questions from Senator Williams.
Thank you very much. Good to see you
Good
again,
to see you, sir.
Glad to hear we're going here. So today it seems like some universities may have priced themselves out of the marketplace, and the accreditation process could have been looking at more about process. I see a lot of process up here and not about performance and outcomes. So I hear maybe in this quality enhancement plan you're going to look at performance and outcomes. So will the number of students who, one, drop out with significant debt, or really more importantly, the number of students who graduate with debt that is then never paid back, that they've had to default on, is that going to be a consideration in your quality enhancement plan and looking at universities?
So affordability is definitely going to be a topic of conversation as we develop these new standards. There's no doubt about that. The parts that we get limited on are going to be things like data systems that don't collect that sort of data. I don't know for sure how that's going to end up looking, but I do know that on the one side, I want to create a system that recognizes and celebrates institutions who have done good work to keep affordability at a point that it can get, that anybody can get to it, and that after graduation salary is able to afford whatever debt they accumulated. How that looks at this very moment in time, I honestly can't answer, because we literally yesterday had the first meeting of the new committee. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to make those recommendations to the board. But affordability, and you know this from my time at SREB, that was a big deal for me at SREB as well. So how we actually approach it, I can't tell you exactly yet, because I need our members to kind of buy in on that. But I can assure you that affordability will be some type of component in our work.
Thank you. Expecting great things from you.
Thank you, sir.
President Pruitt, thank you for being with us today. I'm confident we will have many conversations in the future and have a safe flight back to Atlanta.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Members, you all should have received a list of 5 recommended administrative regulations. I have reviewed them earlier. I'm sure all of you have as well. Do we have a question? We have a question about one. Go ahead, Representative Massaroni.
Yes. My question is actually in a couple of them. There's the term medical inspections in it, and it's kind of vague and very broad. My concern is, is this authorizing like health assessments, data collection without a parental consent?
Which KAR?
Let's go with 050. Has it in there, the first paragraph?
On physical education.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a representative from KDE here. Would you go ahead and address your question to staff attorney for KDE?
Okay. So in the term medical inspections, and we'll go with 050 in the first paragraph, the term it's broad and it's vague and it's not really described of what it's supposed to mean. My concern on this is, will it authorize health assessments, data collection, or even vaccination compliances without a parental consent with that term being used?
Mm-hmm. That is not what's provided in this administrative regulation. In the paragraph that you're looking at, it's the necessity, function, and conformity section, which is where the agency has to set out its authority for promulgating the regulation. So that reference to medical inspection, it actually comes from the statute that provides KDE the authority to promulgate this regulation. The body of the regulation, however, doesn't provide anything about medical inspection. We're just saying that's in the statute that gives us the authority to set forth this regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions on any of the regs? If not, they will go into effect immediately upon adjournment. Our next meeting is November 4th at 11 o'clock. We'll see you then. Meeting's adjourned.